Decades of war, 9/11, 7/7, drones, Anders Breivik, Paris, bombs, more bombs. Groups and individuals intent on driving a wedge between us. To make Samuel Huntington's thesis of a clash of civilizations real. To ignite war between Muslims and the Christian liberal democracies of the West. In Luton, over the past few years, we've been dealing with extremists who've been intent to make that the story of our town. On the one hand, a small group of extremists of Muslim background linked to the well-known extremist preacher Anjem Chowdhury and his followers, members of Al-Muhajirun. On the other, those on the far right, some nationalists, some racists, pretty well all Islamophobe. Members of the English Defence League, founded in our town, led by Tommy Robinson of our town. Since 2009 and the first EDL events, we've had big demos. We've had small flash demonstrations. We've had community rabble-rousing, all intent on driving us apart. We've had an increasing rise of hatred and the poison of that hatred in the environment of our town. People look increasingly with suspicion.
Walking through a crowded place, judgmental stares on every face. For actions taken in my name, you think that I am a disgrace. You refuse my hand, you ignore my embrace. What did I do to deserve this hate? I wear a headscarf, my dad, he has a beard. You mock me and you say I'm weird. I pray, I fast, I volunteer, yet still I am unwelcome here, practicing my faith in constant fear. Terrorists, they deface Islam as they ravage and ruin the common man. This is not my faith. This is not Islam. Don't assume it is. We're about salam. Please, don't hold me accountable for the insane. For all around, you'll see the same. Those aren't my words. Those are written by my teenage daughter. And it's a testimony of the pain felt by me and by many others. But she managed with those words to describe the poison that Peter has talked about and how it permeates into our communities. It brought to the fore a question that I'd often asked myself. How do we stop perpetuating these cycles of hate which lead our young people into alienation? And how do we stop people from responding to hate with more hate? The last few years I've found myself in lots of rooms talking about this very question. How do we stop this? I really admire the conviction of some of those people, because everyone comes in and they've got the answer. Rehana, this is what you need to do in your community. But as we watched real life play out on our streets, sadly those theories didn't fit. And we didn't have the solutions, but we needed to find a way to stop this from happening, to stop this crisis that we could see unfolding. And we needed to find a way that worked for us.
That poem made me weep the first time I heard it after the Paris bombings. I still weep. It describes the pain and the anger, the frustration, the alienation of a generation who've grown up their whole lives with the spotlight of the media on them, and in a climate of suspicion and sometimes hatred. Set against the grand narrative of Huntington's thesis and clash of civilizations, as Christian and Muslim leaders in our town, In 2009, when the English Defence League kicked off, we set ourselves to challenge the growth of hatred by consistent acts of kindness. In June last year, we were facing another demonstration in the town, this time by the far-right group, the Britain First. They claimed to have a Christian message. As Christian leaders in the town, we wrote to them. We invited to come meet with us. They did. We disagreed. They went straight over to Bury Park and had a little provocative engagement there. What could we do? The next day, I was sitting pondering, and a group of community leaders came to see me. Among them was this lady. I'd heard about her, never met her. But when she spoke, she captured the voice of a generation that I wanted to hear, that I'd been concerned about. She spoke not just for her people, but our people. And I knew I could work with her. We've been working together ever since. We responded to that demo by consistent acts of solidarity, statements that said we're together. We got through it. Again, as we'd done others. In January this year, that same organisation, Britain First, came to town, 20 or so of them, parading their big crosses in the middle of a Muslim population. Spewing out hatred, challenging with abuse, videoing it all, putting it up on the internet, 25 million social media impressions within a few days. We got out there as Christian leaders the next day, handing out flowers with a message. Move on 5 months. We're still picking up the pieces from that event. A Rouen takes place, the murder of a Catholic priest. Who do we find knocking on our door? But 20 Muslim leaders in our town, with flowers, with a message of kindness and friendship. We take every opportunity to get together, to be together, to engage together with the latest act of hatred and make kindness the way forward.
And if people spend time with Muslims, we like eating and we like feeding. And we find lots of opportunities to do that, and we call that peace building. And it's been lovely. Pete talked about the extremism side of things, but we've worked on our response to the refugee crisis in food banks, in schools, and it's been great. But that doesn't mean that we've shied away from talking about difficult issues. We resolved last year to tackle head-on the far-right narrative around these so-called Muslim grooming gangs and child sexual exploitations. For those of you who haven't been paying attention, I'm Muslim.
Really?
Yeah.
That's what it is.
And I knew there was no justification within my faith for that behaviour. But what I did recognise was that I, and indeed each and every one of us, had a responsibility to safeguard our young people. So we sat and talked, and primarily as Christians and Muslims, and it was by no means an easy conversation. In our very first gathering, we met the mother of a child who was exploited. She is the most amazing, graceful, wonderful woman.
She's out there somewhere on the internet.
I have had the pleasure of meeting, and it was a difficult listen, but we had to. We then went on to speak to academics, researchers, try to really understand this, and it became clear that this isn't a Muslim problem, a Christian problem, a Jewish problem, a Hindu problem. This was a human problem. But what we did realize and what we did accept is our faiths could and should be part of the solution. we had a responsibility to educate people, and we had a responsibility to make sure that as far as we could, that people understood this and did what they could to protect our young people. So in the summer of this year, we launched FACES, that's Faiths Against Child Sexual Exploitation. And we've been committed since then to raise awareness around sexual exploitation through training and education. And actually it's important for us to recognise that those years of friendship building and trust building were crucial in us being able to sit down and have those really difficult conversations.
Difficult they are, and heartbreaking, but again, we're human beings, more than we're different. Martin Luther King said, there can be no justice without peace, no peace without justice. True peace is not merely the absence of tension, it's the presence of justice. And that's central to all we do. Justice in our community. It's also the motivation for something that we really are focusing on increasingly now. That is an ongoing work in supporting individuals who are affected by the harmful narratives of extremism. It's something we aren't able to talk a lot about because it involves individual lives on the edge, but it's real.
And we regularly come across these people, and we're talking about building bridges today. And part of building that bridge is to acknowledge people's pain and often to get redress for that pain. It's not always possible, and it's not easy, but we need to try and do that. And an example of that is at the moment, we are publishing women's stories of their experiences of hate crimes. Again, as a Muslim, I am mandated to stand for justice. And that's what both Pete and I, and the wonderful, it's not just us, the wonderful community around us endeavour to do with those people. And we do it in the same way that do everything. We approach things relationally, and we try to contrast those negative experiences with something more positive. Pete talked about the flower giving. When Britain first came, there was a particular young woman that they had abused quite awfully. And Pete and his friends came the next day and gave her a flower. And when the Rouen attack happened and we all went, this young lady said, I want to go too. And she could have quite easily been damaged by that, but she didn't. She chose to go and share in that experience with us, which was lovely.
To hear her say, I'm now free, breaks the heart. Ultimately, the message is very simple. Let's try and be nice to each other. That's it. We don't have to be the same to coexist, do we?
No.
We stand in testimony of this, and we've proven this in Luton. The narrative of clash of cultures focusing on difference, it builds up what I am, and it pulls down and rubbishes what you are. It focuses on alienation, and all that makes it happen, disrespect, hatred, conflict. It becomes a self-fulfilling thesis. It provokes a cycle of hatred. We're creating another story in Luton. It's fundamentally opposite. I'm at ease with myself. And I respect you in your difference. I honour what you have to bring. This way of life, this story, draws people together who are different. And even those who've previously had every cause to be alienated. And it's stimulated and empowered by individual acts of kindness.
And if we look around this room, we're all very different. That's okay. We're not always going to like people's thoughts and ideas, but as long as they're not promoting hatred or violence, that's okay too. Peter and I have fundamentally different beliefs which are really important to us. We both have made life choices the other disagrees with, and I'm not just talking about those shoes.
Excuse me.
The reality is that we don't have to we don't have to understand those choices or beliefs, but we do accept one another's right to make those choices for ourselves. And in the same way, we must endeavour to recognise the right of each and every individual to be different, to look different, and to behave differently. that this is the journey that we have been learning to make in Luton. It's a work in progress, but it's fast becoming the Luton way and the Luton story. And when we look at each other with empathy and compassion, and when we really try to put justice at the centre of our intentions, then, ladies and gentlemen, peace really is possible. Thank you.